Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Convery. Today, I am thrilled to have Mark Dembo with us. Mark is a leader in executive education, EdTech, learning, and talent management. His passion about preparing leaders for the future of work serves as a community leader and advocate. Held leadership roles at Cornell University, Lee Heish Harrison Development Dimensions International, and even founded his own successful consulting firm. Mark's experience spans business development leadership, strategic planning, and executive education, making him such a valuable resource for anyone navigating the complexities of today's professional world. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
It is great to be here with you today, Brian.
Thanks. It's so nice to see you and catch up. I'm gonna
Yeah,
start maybe with a few rapid fire questions just to get us going, then we'll
sure.
dive right into it.
Yeah, sounds good.
What is your superpower?
I'd say it's courageous authenticity.
I love that. Courageous authenticity. That's a really good superpower.
Yeah, I had to think
Uh,
about that, but
yeah, no, I like that. I really like that. Thinking about school and subjects and education, a lot of our listeners are, maybe in college, university, or going back to school to upskill and thinking about all those different courses. But what was your favorite subject in school?
yeah, there were so many to choose from. The ones I didn't like, but I would say it was English and literature. And in hindsight, I appreciate it a lot more. You learn so much
Yeah,
from reading.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thinking about work, we all start somewhere. What was your very first job?
Um, My very first real job was scooping ice cream cones and working the grill and waiting tables at Friendly's restaurant.
Wait a minute. Are you kidding me?
I kid you not.
I did too.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Yes. So we have that in
Wait, that was you
common.
now.
Yeah, yes, in my hometown of Poughkeepsie, I worked at
Uh,
Friendly's.
I was farther upstate New York, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. How oh those uniforms, they just washed them and they just stood on
Oh
their
my
own.
God, those polyester uniform. Oh my God, you come home after working and it'd be like be peeling those things off of you. And the little
Which
hats you had to wear,
the
right? Remember
hats,
those?
oh
Hmm.
gosh. What a funny connection that is. And I
Yeah.
remember the fudge and ketchup, they used to all get stuck in it too. It was
Yes.
terrible.
And then the other thing I remember to this day, if somebody asked for a Coke or a Pepsi, you had to say, "I'm sorry, would friendly cola be okay?"
Yes, yes. With the
With the right, the syrup and the yeah, exactly.
wow, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Um, okay, so then also if you had to describe yourself in one word, what would you pick?
Evolving.
Evolving. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So
Yeah.
let's jump into your background, and I'm gonna actually ask a question that I often ask our guests, is understanding like where it all started, where you came from, kind of we'll talk a little about your career in a minute, but I just want to understand a little bit about you and where you grew up, where you came from, how you got to where you are
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I grew up in upstate New York, in the Albany, New York area.
Yeah.
Have a sister who's a couple years older than me. Um, Growing up, I just, I remember I always had, I think about where I am today and kind of what got you to where you are. I just remember always having a curiosity about what makes people tick and wanting to help people do something like I always had this desire to want to be able to have an impact on others in my life. And so early on, as I think about it, like, I remember like when I was in middle school and you think about, well, the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, what do you want to study? I've always had this interest in business to some extent because I was like, oh, I want to be successful, however you want to define that. Um, but it was always again kind of driven by people. So I had an interest at one time. I thought I wanted to be a teacher.
Mhm.
I had an interest in psychology. And as kind of time evolved, somehow, and I know we'll get more into this, I found my interests kind of merging between business and people. So kind
Mhm.
of the human side of business, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I look at kind of my career trajectory and the various things I've done, that's always been kind of a common theme throughout my career.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes sense. Um, so another New York guy on this podcast. You also have a Bachelor of Science in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell. And I know that you are now in the world of executive education and talent development. How did that all come together?
Yeah, well, and kind of going back to what I was saying before in those interests, I think one of the things that originally drew me to study um, ILR, Industrial and Labor Relations, at Cornell was the whole focus of the school there was really around the world of work and how management and labor, if you will, kind of interact, and the roots of the school kind of really came out of the labor union movement, and not necessarily focused on one or the other. It's kind of really looking at both sides, if you will, but really about how do you forge better work to forward the world of work and business. And so when I was looking at schools, that kind of really attracted me. I was like, wow, this is kind of both sides of what I'm interested in. Um, when I really look at the work I do today, there really is a direct correlation. One of the things that I focused very much on that I found an early interest in school, going back to the whole field of organizational psychology, organizational behavior, right? What is it? How do you tap into people to help them excel at work while
Hmm.
at the same time being able to forward the mission or the objectives of the organization? So again, how do you kind of help these two things come together? So the work I do today in executive education of helping to train and teach leaders within organizations how to be better leaders, how to think about their businesses more strategically, right? It's kind of all tied to that. It's what I love about the work that I do. Um, I get to understand what a client, what an organization is trying to achieve in their business strategy, and then help them align the right faculty that we have at Cornell University in our executive education group, right? To really help them forward the skills. So people within the organization enhance their capability, and that in turn helps the organization improve what they're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, thinking a little bit more about transitions, a lot of my listeners here are always thinking about those transitions from high school to post-secondary to their first job, or even like yourself, who's had career transitions as well. You know, with that comes change, obviously. So, do you have any advice or thoughts around how people should, what should they focus on developing and thinking about if they are planning on maybe doing a transition to something new in their life or in maybe just transitioning careers or whatever it might be?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a number of things to think about. The first thing I would say, particularly to those, if you're just starting out your career, you don't have to have it all figured out, right? And again, I can think about, my career, my very first job out of school, I worked in a human resources management training program for a large financial institution. But at the same time, kind of taking a little bit of a sidetrack here, I also, throughout my college years, had a big interest in media and communications and radio. And I realized my very first job out of school in this HR management program, great organization, but I realized this isn't where I wanted to be yet. I
Hmm.
wanted to pursue my interest in media and communications. And I ended up spending a number of years earlier in my career working in radio and then working in media and communications, and eventually kind of found my way back into the kind of work that I do today. But one thing wasn't a straight line, wasn't a straight
Right.
path. but I can look back and see kind of the common threads that got me to where I am today and the work that I do. So, I think for anybody, it's can sound so cliche to say follow your passion,
Right. But no,
but
it's
I,
true.
I but I think it's important to tap into what matters to you, right? One thing I've always tried to hold true for myself, or if I'm mentoring others, is to really remember that we spend so much of our lives working, that you want to be able to do something that it's more than just a paycheck, right? It's what is going to drive you to be your best self, to be your highest, make your highest contribution that you can. So I think if I were to say what, kind of things to keep in mind, first of all, always be open to possibilities.
Hmm.
And don't feel that, oh, I studied X, so therefore I must do why, right? It's keep yourself open to different possibilities. But then core things like being able to think strategically,
Mm.
right? Being able to look at a situation and say, where and how, what are the things that make common points around a situation that you can see different pieces of something coming together. If you can hone that kind of strategic thinking, um, curiosity, again, staying open to what are possibilities. Go into any situation where maybe I don't have the answers, but let me seek, let me listen, let me learn. So being that having that openness, having that curiosity, I think those things are really important. And then the last thing, I mean, I'm sure there's more, but I think one of the last thing I'll mention right now is risk taking,
Hmm.
especially if you're earlier in your career. Take
Exactly.
the risk, take the risk, and know that nothing is a life sentence. You
Right.
can always shift, and you're likely to pick up skills that are transferable. Take what you learn in one position, one job, one industry. And if you say, you know what, I thought I had this interest and it's not right for me, you know what, you're going to learn things that you can take somewhere else.
Exactly. I love that you ended with the risk taking because I think too often a lot of people think I'm stuck or I shouldn't, I'm not really loving this. Or, well, guess what? You learned you don't really love it. Now you can take the opportunity to do something else.
That's
But
right.
I think you nailed it with that because, you know, really too, like how big of a risk is it? You really look at it. I know we
Right.
could say that now, right? But
Right.
like when you see younger people saying, well, I'm like, this is your first job. It's not gonna be your last job. Right?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right. And I think, as well, it is, the world is a bit different, right, than back in the day when I was starting out, or we were starting out, where there was more of an expectation you're going to stay in a certain job for a
that's
certain
true.
period of time and you're going to grow at the company. Look, now the reality is, if you are going to grow, oftentimes you have to make a leap to something else,
Very true.
and taking that risk, even if it's into something completely different. Yeah,
Yeah.
do it, do it.
Yeah, exactly. And with those risks comes learning. And I wanted to ask you because lifetime learning is something we talk about today. I don't really remember talking about it when I was earlier in my career, but the fact of the matter is lifetime learning has a lot of power to it. And, you've continued your education with certificates in critical thinking and strategic human resource leadership. Why do you feel or think lifetime learning is so important? And what would you have for advice for young professionals who are thinking beyond their university years
Yeah,
and
yeah.
upskilling and other things?
Yeah, I love that. I love that question, because to me, lifelong learning isn't just about, oh, I'm going to go and get that, certificate in strategic, the thinking, critical thinking. I actually just in the process now of completing my certificate in generative AI, right? So yes, there's certainly always a place for that ongoing, formal education, says the guy who does executive education. So yes, of course, I believe in that. But so much of learning comes from your experiences.
Yeah,
And I think it's a combination of things. Of it's look, the world today is changing so rapidly. Part of it is you've got to stay relevant in what's happening in the world. I mean, I could easily say, "Oh, I'm at a stage of my career. Why do I need to learn something new? What is this AI stuff? I don't need to." Yes, I do. Of course I do.
Hmm.
I need to know about this. I need to understand it because if I don't, I'm going to be irrelevant pretty quickly, right? So that concept, y- you can finish school and maybe that's the end of your formal education, but no, learning never stops. And I think part of it is I mentioned, the curiosity, staying curious about the world around you and learning things, whether it's through books, through podcasts, through experiences, through courses that you can take. It is so critical. And sometimes just taking and learning something new because it's going to make you a more rounded person.
Hmm.
It doesn't always have to be driven by your career because we're people operating in the world of work. Bring all of yourself into what you do. So learn new things where maybe it's directly relevant to what you do, maybe it's not, but you might learn something that is helpful.
Absolutely. And it may prepare you for that next opportunity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you talk and emphasize the importance of balancing strategic vision and operational execution from a mindset perspective. What does that mean to you? Just curious to share with the audience.
Yeah. There's a saying that I'm gonna forget right now. Um, but it's essentially, saying that you look, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't execute on it, nothing's gonna happen, right?
Hmm.
On the other hand, you could have a mediocre or maybe even not a great strategy, but if you execute well on it, guess what? Probably going to be way ahead of others. So it's really about, balancing, both of those. And look, I can say, and part of it too is, understanding where your strengths lie as an individual.
Yep.
Um, for example, I know for me, I tend to gravitate towards the strategic side of things. I love the big picture thinking. What's the world of possibilities? I mentioned strategic thinking before, and
Yep.
kind of how can we look at disparate parts of something and find common themes, common patterns, and see an opportunity. I love that. It's kind of where I gravitate to. But I've also learned, and this is where I've had to kind of hone my own skills, is on the execution side. As a leader, okay, oftentimes my job is to execute on the strategy. Sometimes maybe a strategy I've come up with or an organizational strategy that, may not, that I may be a part of.
Hmm.
And so I've had to learn to say, okay, how do I as a leader now need to drive the execution of that strategy? What do I need the people on my team to do? What are the specific things? And how do I help my team break that down into specific goals, specific deliverables, specific milestones? And you've got to balance that because oftentimes, too, even as a leader, I may have to go to my team and say, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z against this particular program, this initiative, what have you. But my job as a leader is also to help them understand the strategic picture, the strategic vision of why we're trying to go in a particular direction. So
Absolutely.
so I kind of think of strategy and execution around that as a continuous loop, right? One informs the other. So it's really about trying to find the balance of both of those. And look, earlier in most people's careers, right? Depending, you're going to come in, and oftentimes, the strategy part, that can be the sexy part, the exciting
Yeah.
part,
Yeah.
the envisioning part. But oftentimes you come in to an organization, that's not what your job is. It's okay, we need you to help execute on this.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean you want it, but take the time, even if you're not part of setting that strategy, to understand the strategy. That's going to help you later when you are getting into roles to be able to identify the strategy or in your execution, being able to communicate back up, if you will, right? Where you're seeing where are things working, where are barriers. The more you can understand the strategy as it relates to execution, that's going to really help in as you build your career.
It's great insights. And I think too, when to your point about the strategy and the operation side of things, I always encourage people, I'm like, when you do both, you actually are building skills from the operation side too, of how things
Absolutely.
work. And those are building blocks for other transferable skills or other careers or other things too. So yeah, it's great advice and how you described it was amazing. I think that's super insightful for the audience. I know next thing we're gonna talk about is our favorite topic, networking. And I know we met actually online through networking if
Yes,
you
we
think
did.
about it. So
Yeah.
it does work.
Yes. Yes, it
Especially when you
does.
put your, full authentic self into it. Um, so what are your thoughts about networking and ideas around maintaining those well, first establishing strong relationships and maintaining them, um, if it's the right connection, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think as people build their careers, I think networking is probably one of the most important things you need to do. And I think oftentimes we think about networking as, oh, I got to find a job, so I got to go network. Or, oh, I'm in sales, I've got to go network to find business. And not that those things aren't true or important, but I would encourage a broader view of networking. Again, first of all, I'm going to go back to the theme I talked about before about curiosity about the world, right?
Hmm.
You want to understand more of what's happening in the world and what people are doing. There's no better way to do it than meeting other people and hearing what they're doing, getting to know them personally, professionally. And networking is a big part of that. You and I were talking about this, Brian, a little bit before we started recording. And, as I was saying to you, I used to find um, that interestingly, and people sometimes say to me, no, this can't be the case about you, Mark. I'm actually fairly introverted. um and it's not that I don't love being with people. I do, but I oftentimes tend to, if I'm in an unfamiliar situation, feel uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep.
um And I have found over time, I've shifted my approach. I used to dread going to a networking event. It's like, oh, I gotta learn the elevator pitch and who am I gonna talk to? And what if everybody's standing around and like just talking? How do I break into the conversation? And a lot more networking now can happen online. So I'd say take a very broad-based view to networking. Now, if I go to a networking event, I just want to go and meet people.
Yeah.
I don't go in with an agenda. Just
I
meet
like that.
people. Just meet people. Say hello. Say, hey, what are you doing these days? That's exciting. Tell me, a couple things that are going on, and you just open up a conversation. I have no idea if it's going to be a worthwhile connection or not, but I find most of the times you do that, you meet some really great people, and you never know where things are going to go. And it's kind of when you let go of that agenda. I like to think of, kind of networking and approaching things with, I'll quote a line from Zen Buddhism from Suzuki, Zen master. He said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. Go into
Mm,
situations like that with a beginner's mind. Like,
right.
I don't know what I'm going to learn. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I don't know what I'm going to find out, but let me go with it. Right.
Yeah.
And same thing. Get involved not only in in-person events in different industries. Um, Use social media, use LinkedIn, get involved in different groups that are going to help connect you with people. I've met a lot of great people, including yourself, in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, same here. It's interesting because over the years, to your point, we built it up as this thing that really is built on relationships and talking to people
Yeah,
and to your point, it happens everywhere. It happens at a barbecue. It happens at the gym. It happens at wherever you are. Like it doesn't, it's
That's
not,
right.
just putting a badge on and going to a room with some bad food and staring at a wall. Like it's,
Right.
there's
Exactly.
other
Right.
aspects of it
Right.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
really, if you rip all that apart, you have
Yeah.
a different mindset to go into it, like you shared. And I
There
think
is.
that's
There
where you
is.
really benefit from it. And I'm
Yeah.
even on the fence of this elevator pitch thing. Like I know we all got programmed with that thing. I don't know. Every time someone says they want to practice their elevator pitch, it feels so
Rehearsed.
rehearsed.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, is
I'm
this lead with who you are, not what you do too? Like tell me who you are first. I don't need to
right.
know. Like
Right. Right.
I am
And don't
that's
get me wrong. Of course, I mean, when you get into a conversation, you want to be able to
yeah,
talk about, what you do and those kinds of things. So yes, to that extent, you want to be able to be concise. Um, but I think kind of coming up with these, pithy,
yeah,
kind of things. No, just be real. And I'll go
yeah,
back to, what I said before. Be curious, take the risk, go up and just talk to somebody because I just know what's the worst thing that's going to happen,
exactly.
right? You know,
Exactly.
and
You're right.
be authentic.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah. Rip down those barriers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask you because you're obviously in this world and you're always talking about the future of work and there's tons of conferences and webinars and different things on the subject. But from your perspective, where do you see things going? Like, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're involved, engaged in these conversations. I'm just curious from what, you're seeing.
Well, look, I think what we are clearly seeing right now, there is a big shift happening in the world of work. There's a lot of things happening all at once, from technology, the impact of AI, um, global shifts, right? I mean, not going to get into a political conversation here, but there's a lot of shifts happening globally that's going to continue to impact individuals and businesses and the geopolitical climate. So I think we have to kind of recognize that we are in a time of a lot of volatility, a lot of change, and very rapid change. And we can either choose to fight it or we can embrace it and say, okay, this is what is. So
Yeah.
what do I need to do? So I do think being able to stay, current. And when we think about AI, I mean, I really believe in, and a number of the faculty at Cornell that I work very closely with that do deep research, into this area, not just into the technology itself,
Hmm.
but into the business side of technology. We are at the cusp of what this technology is going to do in businesses. And we can either be afraid of it, or we can ignore it, or we can embrace it.
Hmm.
So I think the right thing to do is to embrace it and to also recognize that what a technology like AI is, it's an enabler.
Sorry.
What can it do to help us? Or as one of our again faculty members, one of our professors says all the time, is that think of AI as being minions, not Terminator.
Mm.
So learning about it though, and how it's shifting is going to be very important. When we think about the future of work and what's going to impact it. At the same time, I feel there can be a danger as we start to use AI in our everyday work that we lose some critical thinking abilities. Because if you just start putting everything through Chat GPT, right? So more than ever, that idea of critical thinking, being able to look at something and saying, does this pass a smell test? Is this moving something in the right direction? That's where AI can really help you do things faster, but you've got to be able to come in and apply that critical thinking skill. AI can't do that. So
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Um, Human connection is going to be even more important, right? As we live in a technology enabled world, more things happening over Zoom, over other technologies. Oftentimes we never meet the people that we're actually working with, but the more you can make those human connections, the more prepared you're going to be for things that are ever changing and shifting in the world. Um, yeah, I think those are some of the key things that
Yeah,
come to mind for
no,
me. Yeah.
it makes sense. I want to link back to networking and lean into mentorship. A lot of times, from my perspective or my humble opinion, is some really great networking opportunities can lead to mentorships just organically.
Hmm.
And I know you've acted as a mentor throughout your career. First of all, why do you think it's so important to be involved with mentoring or mentorship? And what are your thoughts when people are thinking about trying to go out and find a mentor? Um, just curious what you think.
Again, I like how you link that back to networking because in very much the same way, that is kind of what mentoring is, or kind of where it might start. Um, when I think about the concept of mentoring, right, oftentimes we think about you've got the you've got the mentor and you've got the mentee, right? I like to think of it as really it's both. If I'm mentoring somebody, I'm also learning from them, right? I mean, look,
That's
typically
right. That's
if
right.
I'm working with somebody, if I'm mentoring somebody, it's probably going to be somebody, younger than I am, earlier in their career, right? Because they hopefully I can help provide some guidance, some pearls of wisdom, maybe. You know, but I'm learning from them too.
Yes.
It helps me stay current in what's happening, what are some of the trends that just because of where I am in my life I may not be as privy to. So it's really a continuous loop. And how do you find those mentors? I mean, there are formal platforms. A lot of organizations will have, platforms for mentors where you can be matched with somebody internally. If you work for an organization like that, absolutely take advantage of it. Um, and even if you don't, I'll come back to the idea of networking, meeting people. And, again, it's sometimes I think the fear of like, oh, I can't ask them that. It's like, yes, you can. And I think you'll find more times than not, if you approach somebody with a reasonable request and the why, like, hey, I'd love, if you could help mentor me in this way, will be interested because
Hmm.
a lot of people it's about how can I give back, how can I uh, pay it forward, if you will. And
Yep.
again, as I said, kind of also get something out of the process. So, you can find mentors anywhere. It doesn't have to, and it doesn't have to be a formal, mentorship. I've been involved, so just through some LinkedIn groups that I'm a part of. I'll give you a great example. I'm a part of, there's a LGBTQ professionals LinkedIn group that I'm a part of, and there's been a couple of college students that I've connected with that have, reached out and said, hey, and we connect. It's not a formal kind of
Hmm.
thing. Every once in a while, once every month, once every couple of months, it's like, hey, I'm working on something. I'd love your input on something. Happy to do it.
Yep.
And you'll find that there's a lot out there that's available to you and people that are willing to do it.
Yeah, good points and good advice as well. And I think too, sometimes people get hung up on, to your point about they come in different from different places because there isn't one mentor for everything, right? You
Right.
you probably like I have different people I go to for different things,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And mentoring never stops. I mean, I have people that I still consider my mentors now
Yep,
that I will reach out to for different things.
absolutely. And I love that you said it's a continuous circle because really great mentoring is definitely reciprocal and it's,
Yeah,
mutually beneficial, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
that's awesome. I want to dump into one more thing. I know I could we talk with you for hours. We have one little bit more time left. The topic of DE&I. I wanted to talk to you about it from, you're involved in a number of groups that you talked about. You're seeing things happening in, I'm sure at Cornell and in the school level of ways that DE&I is being talked about. what is your, I guess first, what does it mean to you personally, and how are you seeing that needed still today to also influence leadership and talent development?
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, obviously there's so much
It could be a
that
podcast in itself.
oh, absolutely. Look, I think the headline here is it is more important than ever. It doesn't just go away. And I think it's also a matter of, well, what do we mean when we talk about DE&I? There are, organizational initiatives, right, that have been okay. It's a DE&I initiative. We're going to do a DEI training. Okay, that's one thing. I think of those as more kind of that's a check the box thing. Is
Hmm.
that really where substantive change happens? To me, DE&I really means creating, if we think about it in the context of work, workplaces where all voices can be heard and are included, where people are comfortable and free and able to bring their full, authentic selves to work. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to come to work and dump all your personal problems, but not to be feeling like, oh, I'm part of this community or that community. I have to hide, who I am, or that serves nobody
Hmm.
if that is the environment that we have. So to me, DE&I means really kind of creating that kind of environment where freedom of who you are is accepted and welcome, and there's a psychological safety around it where people can feel that they can bring again their full selves to work. And you know what, Brian? At the end of the day, organizations that embrace those kinds of practices, it doesn't have to be a formal program. It's about how leaders view their organization. It's about the culture of the organization.
That's right.
Organizations that embrace that kind of mindset, that encourage it, perform better because you get more voices. We talked before about strategic thinking, about critical thinking. Look, we all have our own life experiences. If the only voices I hear are ones that agree with mine, I'm not going to move my organization forward. Right? So to me, it's a good business practice. So I think that's something that in the world we live in today, where it's harder and harder to in many ways forward those kinds of initiatives, it's actually more important than ever that we stand up for it and make sure they keep happening.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so needed. Um, so first of all, Mark, thank you so much for being a part of today, sharing your insights, your advice. Your journey is a great example of how continuous learning and strategic thinking and focus on people can lead to fulfilling and impactful careers. You shared a lot of insights with the listeners, and it was a great opportunity to connect and catch up with you again. And again, thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you. This is great. It was a lot of fun.
All right. So
All
for our
right.
listeners, if you liked and enjoyed the show today, please share it with your network. You can find us at coffeewithconvery.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram for more updates and more inspiring content. Again, this is Coffee with Convery, where we show you that success isn't always about climbing that corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym. Thank you.